I think as people engage with people of power, it's important to keep that in mind. Like, are you wanting to be seen or are you actually seeing them?
They're there having a real moment. Something happened at home that morning, something is going through their mind. And if you can transcend the persona to have an interaction with that person, that's where all the good stuff happens.
It's this idea that like when women become mom, they sort of make themselves invisible. And you see it on Instagram, you see sort of like, it's all kids, or vistas from vacation, it's not themselves anymore.
My belief is that fear is what keeps us from doing it. And then we're standing on the outsides of circles where we could really be making a difference and an impact and having a piece in the conversation. This is episode 191 of the Brilliant Balance podcast, and my guest today is Elise Loehnen. Elise is a writer and an editor. She lives in LA with her husband, Rob, and their sons, Max and Sam. And while she has co-written 11 books, including 5 New York Times bestsellers, you may know her best as the chief content officer of Goop, the lifestyle and e-commerce company established by Gwyneth Paltrow in 2008. Elise was at Goop for a long time. She was actually one of the earliest hires. And while there, she co-hosted the Goop podcast. You'll know her voice. If you are a listener of the Goop podcast, you will recognize Elise immediately. She also co-hosted the Goop Lab on Netflix, and she led the brand's whole content strategy and programming, including the launch of a magazine with Condé Nast and a book imprint. So in our conversation, which I was so delighted to have, Elise shares terrific lessons with us. She shares lessons about what she's learned about the intimidation factor that famous or successful people can sometimes trigger in others. This is something that I really wanted her to dig into, is what is it like to so regularly have a front row seat to conversations with truly people operating at the highest levels of traditional fame and success. She talks about her experiences interviewing all kinds of truly fascinating humans through the Goop brand. And we also get into this great conversation about what she describes as the era of wise women. And I have to tell you, that thread in this conversation just positively delighted me. So I found Elise to be absolutely captivating. I could have stayed in this conversation for hours with her. She's someone I would love to have over for dinner on my back patio. So settle in, relax, and listen in to a truly fabulous conversation with the brilliant Elise Loehnen. So Elise, welcome to Brilliant Balance. I'm so excited to have you with us.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. Anything with the word balance is interesting to me, since it's the most ephemeral, impossible concept to every woman.
Yes, we hear this all the time. People are like, why did you call this company and this podcast Brilliant Balance? You know, everyone thinks that's a unicorn, right? Yeah. And I do know that. I think it's, we spend a lot of time grounding in, it's all in how you define it. It's all in what's the visual metaphor, right, that you're chasing. So
it's a daily practice.
Yeah.
Daily practice. Not everything at the same time, ever.
Right. Tell us a little bit about what today looks like for you. It's a fun way to start the show, is a little peek behind the scenes at what does your day look like today?
Well, today's interesting because I got my second dose of the vaccine 2 days ago. And so I had a bed day yesterday. I had COVID in January. So I had a strong reaction, had a bed day yesterday. I just read all day and listened to podcasts, which was kind of amazing. You don't always want a fever in order to justify sitting on your butt, but that's what I needed. Yes. And today I'm having that bounce back, feel better. But I intentionally I'm doing this. I'm doing a consulting call. I'm doing podcast prep for the launch of my own podcast. And I have therapy every Friday at 1:00.
I bet that's an appointment you look forward to, right? It's like the sacred time in the week. And what a great time to do it, heading into the weekend, Friday at 1.
Yes, it is
I love it.
sacred. It is one of the upsides of COVID. I found, interestingly, like it was a weird transition, but I love therapy on Zoom. There's no travel time, there's no parking, and you can sort of drop in and then get back to your day. And I never have to miss it, like there's no bounds.
Yes. I heard cancellation rates at therapists are way down with the
Yeah.
opportunity to do telehealth, which is so great, right? You want people to show up and get the help. It's awesome.
Yeah, certainly. And it's nice to be in the presence of people's energy, but I also feel, and I know everyone's so tired of Zoom, but I also feel like it feels just as intimate, interestingly.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's get into some of the stuff that you've been up to and some of the lessons that I hope you can help us learn from your experiences. So, I was looking back at all the many things you've done, and just to catch up the audience, prior to joining Goop, where you were most recently, you had, VP level positions at Shopzilla, editorial positions at Condé Nast Publications. You've co-written 11 books, with big names, y'all, like Ellen DeGeneres and Lauren Conrad and Sophia Amoruso. Like, these are people that all of us know. These are A-listers. And I'm curious that even though you were running in these circles prior to starting at Goop, when you cross paths with, the venerable GP and enter the circles that we all kind of sit and think about her running in, this highly influential circle, what did it feel like to enter that circle as you came into Goop?
Yeah. What's interesting, as you mentioned, I have had just throughout my career a lot of contact with celebrities. I used to write the cover stories at Lucky. And as you said, I've written a lot of books, including some with celebrities. I helped Brene Brown with her last book. So like a whole gamut of interesting people. And as a child, even living in Montana, this is so strange, but like celebrities came to Montana even then. And so I used to babysit for Andie MacDowell,
Oh, that's
which
so great.
isn't that funny?
First of all, I love
know.
her. Yeah.
I know. She's so beautiful. And her kids were lovely.
Oh.
And so I had sort of this strange, like tangential or peripheral contact with celebrities. And then you're also in Montana where you're not in the middle of culture in that way. And I'm a curious person just by nature. And so I've always just explored those people as not as curiosities, because here's the thing about all celebrities is that they're some of the most objectified people in the world. And what's really interesting to be in their presence and to work alongside them is that you sort of see that abstraction. You have the experience of the person, and then you have the experience of the person as the person. And they're really different. And I think as women, we've all experienced that in our lives, any sort of objectification. Like sometimes it's with a boy or girl or love interest, right? Where you're like, you don't really see me. You see who you think I am, and you're relating to that
persona,
that objectified persona in a way that's very alienating, right? It's a very weird experience. And so I think that I was aware of that very early, particularly in writing the profiles that I did for Lucky magazine, which was the magazine about shopping.
Yes.
Because it wasn't a typical editorial where I'd be like explaining my whole experience of the day with them and the way that you read most profiles. Mm-hmm. They were also having to give me sort of answers to shopping questions. And you could see sort of like the machinations as they were trying to understand how whatever it was would land with the audience. And so I sort of experienced, just by sitting next to them on the couch or across from them at a table at a shoot, the creation of the persona from the person. And like as you see both of those things come together, you sort of start to understand that dynamic and how it works. And then somehow it becomes less intimidating, particularly if you can attune yourself to who the person actually is. And I think that that's why I work so well with celebrities, is because I think that I can create a comfort with the actual person by not focusing on the projection. And then the other thing that's really interesting, and I think that I've observed and watching people interact when I've been in the company, and we all do this. And it's even happened to me weirdly, like when the show came out, I've experienced this personally. Or at things like an in-goop health where I was sort of on stage all day, is that people come up to you and they're not really seeing you. They want to be seen by you. And it's the strangest experience. It's very not alien, and everyone's not. This isn't 100% of the time, but there's certainly that happens.
Yeah.
And so I think as people engage with people of power, it's important to keep that in mind. Like, are you wanting to be seen, or are you actually seeing them?
Yes. I love the word that's coming to mind is compassion, like having compassion for how that real person who's kind of inside the persona is feeling in the interaction. Like they're there having a real moment. Something happened at home that morning. Something is going through their mind. And if you can transcend the persona to have an interaction with that person, that's where all the good stuff happens.
Totally.
And I bet you have a
1,000%.
superpower in that, honed, because we have to build resistance isn't the right word. It's like tolerance for
it's a resiliency. It's like a durability around it. And it's sort of this like, and part of it is like, I think part of it comes from having like been with those people over longer periods of time, but like just being able to be with someone and to sit with them, like that's what's required, which I know everyone doesn't always have that opportunity or that, but that's really what it is. It's just like it's almost like an energetic enmeshment, which sounds so woo woo, but it's just this ability to sort of sit with them until everyone sort of like attunes, and then to see them.
It makes me wonder, do you think there is a time factor? Like so often, if someone listening is thinking of themselves as like, I'm just an everyday person out here, right? I just live in my everyday life. And my kind of brush with celebrity is so brief, right? I'm at an event, or I get this one moment, they're in a restaurant. Do you think there's a dynamic that's driven by that time pressure of feeling that? Yeah, I bet there is.
Of course, it's driven by time pressure. It's driven by intimidation. It's driven by sort of feelings of overwhelm and this like, I need to take advantage of this moment because like when could this ever happen again? And it goes to that need to be seen by that person, which I think is just interesting culturally. And I understand it completely. It's very
it's going to rub off or something, that their validation of being, I don't know. I wonder what that is, that need to be seen. What do you think it delivers to the everyday person in the interaction?
I think that the need to be seen is universal. And I think often even celebrities are probably like the biggest examples of that, of this profound, I mean, they're obviously performers and gifted artists and have an incredible talent. But I think that there's probably not 100%, but there's probably a wound there of like needing to be seen. And I think it comes out partially from that objectification that happens so early. I think all women in particular really feel this, or like if you search inside of yourself, you might be able to recognize the truth in that there's like the you, and then there's the you that people see. And there's like a wound there. So I think that when we want to be seen by someone who's seen, it's just a validation exercise. I think it's all like, and I don't know why it's so pronounced with people who matter. I think it's just that it's like, these people have power. They're important. They count. And like, do I count? Am I real? Does my presence matter? I think it's that.
We were talking before you came on the show about the term proximity to power. And that's, I think a lot of us assign people who have had even proximity. I worked in the White House. I was on this person's team as like it somehow rubs off. And the truth is they're all just people having their daily lives and interactions, but it is vexing why it's so hard to remember that. And we create all of this story around why this will be different,
and then you attach your identity to that in a way that's like, you don't feel not good about, but it's interesting. I think we're also like experiencing a really profound change. I mean, obviously in so many ways socially, but we're also maybe seeing sort of and we've been in the midst of this for a while, but it's like the rise of influencers, the rise of sort of wise women in the culture who probably aren't famous or aren't actresses or singers, or sort of a new economy that's emerging. Because when I was working in magazines, it was all about models. Like it was
appearance,
models. Then sort of like editors had a moment, which was funny, and then actresses, then bloggers and influencers. And now we're sort of seeing sort of this next wave of like the Glennon Doyles and the, Brene Brown, for example.
Talk more about wise women. That's a term I love. Tell me a little more about what you see happening there.
Well, I think that in our patriarchal culture, we have, and this is the culture's fault. It's not nobody's fault, but like there's just been this. I just read this amazing, probably not obscure when it came out, but it's from 1985. It's called The Crone by this woman, Barbara Walker. And it's about sort of the triumvirate of the woman, sort of the maiden, virgin, the mother, the crone, and how the crone has been excommunicated sort of from the patriarchy since the advent of the patriarchy. Turned into witches, turned into, the wise women. It's like they're the healers. They're the ones who initiate girls into what it means to be a woman. They know all the secrets. They have all the information. They have all the wisdom, really. And they've been booted. And you see that sort of now, the implications of that. One, I mean, it's like hard to imagine what we've lost sort of over the centuries from these women, some of whom were murdered, right? And others who are sort of made irrelevant. And we've all been complicit in this as well, which is sort of, I think, the painful part of it. But I think we're coming around to the other side of it. But, it's this idea that like when women become moms, they sort of make themselves invisible. And you see it on Instagram, you see sort of like, it's all kids, or Vistas from Vacation. It's not themselves anymore. There's this shaming around like, how dare you think of yourself as a sexual, beautiful person? No one wants to have sex with you. Like, put it away. No one wants to see that. It has like shows up in so many different ways of this shove aside. And I hope that we're starting to culturally recognize like, wait, like why are we doing that? Like these women are the ones who have seen it, who can show us the way, and their relevance is sort of more essential to sort of our survival and our thriving than
anything. Yeah. I mean, this is so my jam. The notion of what I often call the wisdom chapter, like when we're entering that wisdom chapter where the lessons are just like rising at this increasing rate. And yet there's a sense of, well, is anyone going to listen to me? What do I do with these if I don't have that power of youth or beauty or celebrity or whatever on my side? And it's very encouraging to me to see this cast of wise women rising up who are getting it seemingly in increasing numbers, like the platform, the audience, the resonance of their message. It feels like there's a readiness culturally for that, which I'm super excited about, excited about.
And I think I think we're having sort of this head scratching moment of like, wait, why? And part of that I think is because, generations of women, our mothers, et cetera, sort of, we all came of age. We're at such an interesting inflection point in terms of this, like letting go of the myth of like the 50s and the housewife. And, it's like that was created, it existed for a decade. And sort of this nadir in terms of like what was allowed or expected of women. And now we're sort of crawling out of it. But like my mom, I don't know about your mom, but my mom was sort of this generation. She was born in 1950. Where it's like she could have been something. She's a brilliant person, and she went to this, now defunct nursing school, but she grew up oldest of 7, no money, lack, met my dad at the Mayo Clinic, took the path of being the doctor's wife, and lived this life of sort of regret and a little bit of resentment, of sort of like, I could have, should have been someone, anger at herself. And that was interesting to grow up as her daughter and to feel that energy, which is completely understandable. But I think that that's really common. And we're at this sort of like moment of, particularly as we reckon with our own mothers and think about, I don't have any daughters, but of shaking that out. Like, I think it's going to take a couple more generations before we can really start to celebrate women at every stage. But I think we're in the middle of it, and we just need to acknowledge it more.
Yes. Yes. And it's so much of what we talk about in our client community and on the podcast is that how do we harness the both and nature without feeling like we're failing on all fronts? What's the redefinition of those roles? And it is new. I think this is the first generation that truly is embracing big impact in both arenas and trying to figure out how to, what are the stories we tell ourselves in the midst of that?
What do we tell ourselves? Yeah.
Yeah. It is those wise women who are teaching us. And that, I think that's who we're all looking to say like, yes, that's putting words around something that I didn't have words for before. It's all the women you named are clearly faves. And it's that's their power, is the ability to give language and perspective to these universal experiences. It's like balm, right? When we get to hear those things.
Yeah, so true. And I think it's both and then it's like, as the culture shifts to accommodate it, where men start doing more and we redefine, not even redefine, but like start to think about these ideas of masculinity and how masculinity, I was just reading Terry Real's book from the 90s called I Don't Want to Talk About It. And if anyone has a man in their life who suffers from depression or just interested in sort of the construct of masculinity, it's sort of the first landmark book about male depression. And it's really interesting because he just talks about like how we live in this culture where the construct of masculine, no one is like, we need to teach girls how to be women. There's this assumption of like femininity, but we still are in a culture of like, we need to teach boys how to be men. And that has implications for women too, right? Particularly for those of us who are working and have our own ambitions outside of parenthood, who want partners, who want to like sort of be participant in co-creative activities around kids. And so I think it's all in play, but like we're in the midst of this experience of like all these puzzle pieces moving around and trying to understand like where they go and where they came from.
It's so validating to hear you articulate that, because I do think you've had a front row seat to a lot of discourse with people who are leading the way in these conversations. And so it feels that way from my seat. It feels like there is a seismic shift, like the tectonic plates are moving, right? That's what it feels like. But it's you've had so many one-on-one conversations with the people who are at the forefront of that it's validating to hear you say it back. I want to talk about a couple of those conversations, because in your work with the Goop podcast, and now what will be your own, and I want to hear about that in a second, you've interviewed just hundreds of thought leaders and experts and incredible minds. Was there anyone that was intimidating to you, given what you've now shared with us, this context of like, I've built some resilience for this? Were there a few people who stand out as like, man, I was worried before I got in there?
Yeah. I mean, I think that as a white woman, conversations about race, like I still don't have the durability that I would like to have. And I certainly have discomfort and fear of saying the wrong thing and messing up and showing my ignorance. And so early on, one of my first interviews, and I've now interviewed him twice, is actually one of my very favorite people to interview because he is like next level, is Brian Stevenson from EJI. I'm sure you guys know who he is. Sorry, there's a fly. Equal Justice Initiative. And he, frees men from death row, Black men from death row who have been either way over sentenced. Some of them are innocent. But that's not really the point. It's not an innocence project. It's about sort of our carceral system and how messed up it is. So I was very intimidated. There are certain people you interview too, where you're like, by taking an hour of your time, I am depriving like someone who really needs it. So I felt a lot of pressure to really deliver on that interview. And Kendi, when I interviewed him, I was scared to mess it up. But part of what I try to do when I am interviewing, particularly on these questions of the day, which are very, very fraught and difficult and complicated, is model for the audience that like you just have to go for it. And I think it goes back to the beginning when we were talking about celebrities. It just requires a certain amount of bravery of like looking like a fool or maybe saying the wrong thing, or it's an act of vulnerability. But like, how vulnerable is it for me, really? At the end of the day, it's just like, I could just mess up. I could, but like, you have to be willing to do that. And as women, I think we're such perfectionists. We think that we can nail it. And I think modeling, like, we can't.
It feels like there's an element of humility that is at the core of this, like being able to, I'll just say, step outside the circle you run in, right? If there's like, for any of us, me or anyone listening, we have a circle where we're like, these are the kinds of people, this is the sort of circle I run in. And when you step outside that to have a conversation and stand on your own 2 feet and ask questions and respond, it's an up-leveling. There's a level of, and the person, this is what I'm hearing from you, the person on the other side of that interaction may not view it that way, may not want it to be viewed that way. That might create a whole level of pressure and noise that's unnecessary. But that's the courage that's trying to be summoned and I don't think anybody, I, for one, am not interested in having the selfie moment. Like that is just completely disinteresting to me. But I'm very interested in having good conversations with people who are playing the game at the next level. And totally. I think that's what I'm kind of maybe trying to touch for our audience is when we want that, whether it's in our company, right? And it's the vice president who we're afraid to talk to inside of a corporation, or it's in our community and it's someone who's in office and we're like, I don't know that I can go have that meeting or conversation, or whether it's in the celebrity culture, that your words of wisdom around how do we access the courage and the sort of compassion to be level set and to make it a meaningful interaction and not just a throwaway moment.
Totally. And I think so much of that, obviously, if you see someone at dinner, that's one thing. And if you have sort of a glancing understanding of their work, then like, you probably don't need to bother them. But if, one thing about doing the podcast, which the feedback that I always got, which was so funny, guests would sit down with me and I had a reputation as being someone who read the book. So that's rare, actually, which I find just kind of appalling and embarrassing for like my fellow journalists. But preparation, which I feel like a lot of women are really good at, is respect, and as far as I'm concerned. And so I think when you see someone too, and you can form those connections, and it's easy to tell immediately, you're like, oh, this person like knows not knows who I am, but actually going back to this, like they see me, or they've taken the time to try to understand my work, or they feel my work, or they've thought about my work. And I'm not starting from the beginning with just like, oh, like I saw you on TV, and which is weird.
Yeah, they don't just want to stand in the warmth of your sun, right? Like when you were saying before, they want to be seen by you. That's what I was hearing is like, there's a receivership to that of like, I just want to stand in the warmth of your sun and kind of have it shine on me, versus there's a duality to this interaction. There's a conversation to be had. There's a discourse to be elevated. And that's, I think, what, again, whether it's in our company and our community and the culture at large, like that's where we're calling women to stand in their own brilliance and do that, not be afraid of it. Because my fear is, or not my fear, my belief is that fear is what keeps us from doing it. And then we're standing on the outsides of circles where we could really be making a difference and an impact and having a piece in the conversation.
Yeah. The other thing is, and this is like a media training TV tip, but it still serves me well, is, when I used to do all the TV for Lucky Magazine when I was like, 24 years old. And the first segment I ever did was in local TV in Philadelphia. It was so exhausting and stressful. I slept for like 18 hours after. Like, it's such an exertion of energy. But then I realized and so much of this, we've talked about sort of resilience or contact. And obviously I've had a lot of that throughout my life to build my durability. However, I realized when I started doing national TV, Today Show, more high pressure stuff, if I could just know what I was going to say in that first sentence, then I knew I could relax into the conversation, and I knew the material and I would get through it. And, so that's also, I think it's like part of it is also tricks of like, you see someone, you're at a conference, you're like, wow, I love that person's work. This is how it impacted me. Just like come up with the first sentence, get comfortable, and then let the conversation happen and relax into it and respond. And I honestly, I feel like then you're in it, then you're in the river.
And you do not know where it will lead. You do not know.
Yeah.
There's a story, that I'll share from when I was 18 years old, and I was at this awards thing. That's kind of a long story, but at this awards thing were a lot of very famous people and just some real players in business and industry. And there was a woman sitting at the table wearing this stunning pearl choker, like just stunning ball gown and this 3-strand pearl choker. And 18-year-old me like could not take her eyes off of this woman and this choker. And so I summoned all my courage to, I don't know why, go over and tell her that this was stunning. And I just like couldn't take my eyes off of it. So she turns around and very graciously introduces me to her husband, who I had not noticed at all, in his tux. And we have this brief interaction. That man turned out to be Chris Hemmeter, who was a massive real estate developer on the West Coast and the Pacific Rim. And that got me my first internship during college, where I went to work at a resort in Hawaii because I followed up on that interaction like 6 months later with a letter, and they remembered it because it was genuine, it was authentic, it was real, it's probably cute because I was 18, but that speaks to what you're saying of like, just have one thing to say that gets you in the game and you just don't know where it will lead.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because there's this selflessness that's required too. And going back again to this idea of like wanting to be seen, but if you can just give, and that's the intention, isn't so much I want to be seen or I want this person to hire me or whatever it is. But if you can just if you can just like give to that person, it's a much more sort of enduring and durable relationship. And particularly now, like there are people, like I've made really good friends in my DMs on Instagram, for example. And it's like, it's over time, right? It's like, just like passing comments, and then you start like sort of building intimacy and rapport. And then I feel like it's totally appropriate and okay to be like, oh, can you, when they ask me, they're like, oh, I'm writing a book. Can I send it to you? Would you consider blurbing it? Like stuff like that is not, it's of course, instead of just this like onslaught out the gate of like, hey, can you do this thing for me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure is the everyday occurrence for people that, again, as we're listening to this episode, the people you're putting in those seats, the names that are coming to your mind, that is their everyday reality as people ask. So finding a way to give, finding a way to be genuine, and not all, like terrified of the interaction, because that is not fun for anyone involved in the exchange, right? No, I don't want to manage that for you. That's a lot of exchange. Elise, I want you to tell us what you're working on now. What's up next for you?
Okay. So I am, as mentioned, we're doing the kickoff. There's no release yet. Kickoff call is next week, but launching a podcast, hopefully in July with Cadence 13, which will tentatively be called Pulling the Thread. And similarly, like, not deep, but like sort of in-depth conversations with thought leaders, 45 minutes to an hour, and across a wide spectrum of interest, probably less straight up health, I just can't, I'm just burnt out on diet and fitness and all of the, and wellness
Yeah.
as a construct. So that's, I'm working on that. I'm almost done with my shitty first draft. Sorry, I hope it's okay. I said
Yeah.
the S word. Of my first book under my own name, which will come out, which is due in October. So I'm ahead, but I need to do a lot of revising. And that will come out in October of 2022. That's with Dial Press at Penguin Random House. So with an amazing editor, Whit Frick, who she did Glennon, she did Untamed. She has Rachel Cargill's book coming out soon. And that book is about women and the patriarchy and sort of a lot of what we've been talking about, what we police in ourselves and then in each other. And it's like a little bit of memoir only in the context of how things relate to myself as a way of sort of introducing these topics, but really more about sort of what we're collectively observing in the culture. And I need more stories from other women. That's the next phase. And then I'm just doing a little bit of consulting, and I'll probably do a little bit more ghostwriting just because I like it. And my hope is that I can not ever have another full-time job, but we'll see if I can pull that off.
Well, that is brilliant balance, right? At its finest. I designed this thing the way I want it. I love it.
Yeah.
We will link up the things. So as they become available, we'll get the podcast linked and we'll get the book. Is there a pre-sale link for the book yet, or a website where people can find you?
Not yet. Well, I have a website, eliseloehnen.com.
That's what we'll do. We'll send them there.
It'll be there eventually.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it's early, but I feel like so many people are like, and I wrote a book. That has not been my process. It's like, I have written books really fast, but this is not that book. So
I wonder if it's different because it's all yours.
Hugely different. For one, like, yeah, when you're writing for other people or ghostwriting, which I do really love to do because it gives you sort of a window into someone else's mind and you're speaking to an entirely different audience. Like I wrote a memoir like with the Bella twins, who are WWE wrestlers. Like that was fascinating, and they're lovely girls. And like you learn all about these subcultures and but yeah, you there's no ego involved. So you're sort of scaffolding and creating structure around other people's ideas and stories. And that's kind of a beautiful thing and a totally different experience than writing something for yourself. And writing your own book is that I'm sure people who are listening have done it or sort of been exposed to it. It's lonely, and it's so fun, but it's also scary and lonely. And in the middle, you're like, is this any good? And is anyone going to find any value in this? Or is this sort of like,
Yes. Preaching to the choir, I will tell you. We'll talk about that one offline. But I do think that it is, I'm so excited for you that it's your turn to put your own work and your name on it out in the world. You deserve it. All the ideas you've shared with us today are so juicy and rich. And I love the term pulling the thread. I think that's just feels exactly right for the show. So thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your wisdom and your ideas with our listeners. It has been exceptional.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me. This is so fun. You're so good at this.
Well, I hope you loved listening to Elise as much as I loved talking to her. I just loved that conversation. I know that I'll be watching for the release of her podcast soon and her book when it's out. And in the meantime, I'll tell you, she is streaming some conversations on Instagram. So make sure you go check those out as well. She's at Elise Loehnen, spelled the same way we have it in this episode. I am at C Skolnicki. If you're not already following on Instagram, it's a great place to get some bonus content and behind the scenes stuff. So if you loved today's episode, would you share it with the wise women in your life? It's so easy to just grab the episode, click forward, and share, or post it on your social media and see if other women you know would benefit from this conversation. That's all for today, my friends. Till next time, let's be brilliant.